details through on the chat. So welcome everybody. My name is Sue Kay and I'm the chair of Robotics Australia Group, and with me today is Nicole Ireland, who is our general manager. And today, Nicole and I are just going to give you an update on Robotics Australia Group, what has been happening, what we've been doing, and what we hope to be doing for the rest of this year, and to get some of your feedback on that. So before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all of the various lands on which we would be meeting today. In Brisbane, we're meeting on the lands of the Turrbal and AEST people, and I'd like to pay my respects to our elders past, present and emerging. So, just to give you a little bit of context, Robotics Australia Group is the peak body for robotics in Australia, and we like to see ourselves as representing pretty much everyone who has an interest in robotics, and in particular the creators of robotics and robotics related technologies, and people who are integrating robotics technologies. And we like to see ourselves as a pretty broad church, with that including a lot of different types of technologies. So our integrators, users, researchers and educators. And I think I might have managed to skip a slide there. I did mean to start off with the agenda and to let you know how you can communicate best with us. So we're just going to, as I said, give you a bit of an idea of why Robotics Australia Group was formed, introduce you to who are the people behind Robotics Australia Group, tell you about our progress and what our plans are, and then we are hoping to have some time for some Q&A. But you might appreciate it's Nicole and I and quite a big audience. So what we encourage you to do, and it's great to see so much chatter happening on the chat channel, but we may not be able to keep too close an eye on that. So if you have a particular question that you'd like to ask, then we would suggest that if you could, please put that in the Q&A, and we will aim to answer all of those questions after we've finished giving our update. So please be patient with us as we navigate our way through, and hopefully we'll have time to answer everybody's questions at the end. So as I mentioned, Robotics Australia Group is the peak body for robotics in Australia, and we were formed to help facilitate the growth of a sustainable and internationally competitive national robotics industry, which is something that everyone involved in Robotics Australia Group feels very passionate about. So we formed in May 2020, which seems like quite a long time ago now, but you know, forming in COVID is obviously not the most ideal situation. And the reason that we formed were that we were getting a lot of messages from people who are involved in robotics that there are some key things that need to change to really help us develop a sustainable robotics industry here. And that is first, tackling a lot of the visibility and brand issues around robots, and how often people associate the term robots with job loss, whereas, you know, most of us who are in the industry appreciate that there's really very little evidence for that. Robots tend to equal job creation. We were formed to help with developing the capability and to grow the robotics industry here in Australia, because I think it was recognised that we have some great bones, but the industry is still reasonably immature and fragmented, and we wanted to be able to prevent that fragmentation and start to bring things together and get people to work on collaborative projects. As part of that, we're really hoping to establish our robotics network, and that's something we'll be really focusing on in this year. And we're also exploring all sorts of different funding models to help support Robotics Australia Group, and importantly, to support the companies who form part of our robotics industry here in Australia. And while Robotics Australia is a national entity, our intention is to collaborate or even to create state-based representatives so that we can pull in all of the different people who are representative of and have an interest in the robotics, and make sure that everyone feels that they can be a part of this network and can contribute in ways that are meaningful to them. And often, you know, that can involve working in with groups like the Queensland Robotics Cluster, who are doing a great job bringing together a lot of the local capability. So in terms of our board, I'd like to introduce you from left to right from the top, or in a clockwise direction. Christian Ruberg, who was an automation engineer who now leads CSIRO's Future Digital Manufacturing. Also on our board is Adrian Beer, who is the CEO of METS Ignited, an industry growth centre and a strong supporter of robotics and automation in the METS sector. Shana Glover, who is the founder and CEO of Invelo after leading large-scale robotics and automation projects in the mining industry. Nathan Kirchner, who is a roboticist and also the CTO of Prescient, a Robotic Vision company that is developing safety products for the construction industry. And Kathy Van Voot, our company secretary, who also during the daytime works for the Australian Space Agency. So as you can see, we have a range of people involved in Robotics Australia Group with a range of backgrounds, and that's quite deliberate because robotics, as everyone can appreciate, impacts on all sectors of the Australian economy, and we were very keen to make sure that we were covering off on a lot of those sectors with people who have deep sectoral experience of the application of robotics in those areas from different parts of Australia. Now, where is the robotics industry in Australia? And I wish I had some updated figures on this, but one of our plans for this year is to try and get those updated figures. It is very hard to find out exactly what the capability of companies in Australia is in this area. And that's mainly because the Australian Bureau of Statistics doesn't collect that data. So we really have to collect it ourselves. And when the first Robotics Roadmap was put together by the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision back in 2018, using a couple of proprietary databases, our best estimates were that there are more than 1,000 companies who are operating in the robotics space in Australia, that they're employing more than 50,000 people. And we've updated this figure that currently that would be worth about $18 billion in revenue to the Australian economy. So I think, we represent a significant sector, and it's a matter of how we elevate this information so that we can get the attention that we need to help ensure that we have a sustainable industry into the future. Now, it's not all good news in that if you have a look at the International Federation for Robotics, our robot ranking is falling and unfortunately has been falling for some time. Some of this is historical and mainly related to the closure of most motor vehicle manufacturing in Australia. Motor vehicle manufacturing is one of the primary drivers of the measures that the Industrial Federation of Robotics uses to look at robot population density. So it's exclusively a measure of what we call industrial robots. So that doesn't include the service robots that many companies in Australia would rely on, which would operate in agricultural scenes or outdoors or indoors as service robots. It really is very exclusively for those industrial robots that you would typically find in the manufacturing scene. And I think that Australia's manufacturing sector is really focused on areas that to date have not lent themselves to a lot of application of robotics. So while it's disappointing to see that we rank almost last in the world in terms of our world robot population density, we now have 75 robots per 10,000 employees compared to the top country, Singapore, which has 831. There are some structural reasons why that occurs. And also, I think, one of the issues that we have is that we have no sovereign industrial robot capability. So we have quite a lot of companies that are building service robots. We have quite a lot of companies that are importing industrial robot components and then, making new robots out of those. But in general, Australia does not manufacture robots that can be used in manufacturing. So all of these factors contribute to the fact that we have quite a fall in the rankings of robot population density, but I don't think that's something to be too concerned about because I think that our specialty lies elsewhere. But these are some of the factors that we need to consider when we look at how we can best support the robotics industry in Australia moving forward. And certainly we know that manufacturing is going to be a very important component in hopefully a post-COVID world, because the Australian government has invested significant funds in towards different aspects of manufacturing. And this is something where, we would hope that we will see a lot more adoption of robotics and automation. And if that is something that we can contribute to with sovereign capability, then obviously that will be a good thing. And Nicole will update you on how we have tried to leverage some of these opportunities to create a robotics venture factory in the future. So some of the priorities that we're looking at for Robotics Australia Group is to really increase the number of Australian-based growth robotics companies so that we can have that sovereign capability and really help to drive Australia's technology export market. Again, we probably don't have a lot of great data on this, but for many companies in that robotics and AI space, often they don't supply into Australia, they mainly export. And that's very good for the Australian economy and good for jobs here in Australia, and something that we would like to encourage more companies to consider. We would love to be able to improve the investment and funding environments for robotics and AI in Australia, which many people have identified as a key challenge. And we would love to be able to make sure that our research community is very well linked in with our local robotics capability so that we can see the commercialization of locally developed intellectual property in robotics and robotics related technologies, and hopefully create some unicorn companies of the future which benefit Australia. We also want to make sure that we're accelerating and amplifying the adoption of Australian-made robotic and AI solutions. And one of the things that we've been doing to help make sure that happens is actually just promoting the type of work that is occurring, often drawing to people's attention that there is local capability and that they don't necessarily have to look offshore for solutions. Another challenge is increasing Australia's technology workforce so that we can have the people with the skills that are required to be able to build the robotics companies of the future. And if at all possible, we want to help to develop the governance systems that help to ensure that the robotics solutions that are developed here are of benefit to Australia and, I guess, conform to a lot of Australia's values and way of life. So one of the key projects that we were able to complete at the end of last year was the development of a second version of the Robotics Roadmap for Australia. So this is something that the Robotics Australia Group has taken responsibility for since the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision is no longer operating. And so the Robotics Roadmap 2022 was an expanded version of the 2018 version, where we included some new chapters, a whole range of case studies, and it was really pleasing to see a lot of the changes that had occurred between the first and the second versions of the roadmap. So we were able to track an additional $130 million worth of investment in robotics companies. For those of you who are familiar with the 2018 roadmap, one of the depressing figures in that was actually the very low rate of investment up until 2018 that had occurred in our local companies, whereas now that has significantly increased. The value of robotics to the Australian economy has increased by at least a third over just the last 4 years. We're seeing an increasing number of students enrolling in mechatronics courses, which is really great news in terms of the pipeline for talent in the future. We had a large increase in the number of people who participated in roadmap workshops and contributed. And, we certainly increased the number of case studies, and there were plenty more, I'm sure, if we dug beneath the surface, that we could have added. So really very impressive work happening here in Australia across all sectors of the economy, and something that we should all be very proud of. And of course, we also, since the first version of the roadmap was released, have seen a number of new robotics initiatives come about within Australia. So not only the formation of the Robotics Australia Group, but the creation of the Queensland Robotics Cluster, RoboWest in Western Australia, the SMARC initiative in WA, and the AEST Group, as well as test sites looking to be developed in Joondalup, Neerabup in Western Australia, and also Cloncurry in Queensland. So we put in a couple of extra chapters in this last version of the roadmap, mainly in the area of education and skills. And we separated out a few different sections, such as giving space, agriculture and environment their own headings, because there is so much work currently happening in those areas. So this is a link for those of you who haven't seen the roadmap. We're looking to officially launch, if we can get some interest from our federal politicians, we're looking to officially launch the roadmap in March of this year. But given COVID and potential early election, I guess we're just hedging our bets a little bit on what sort of event that might look like. But certainly in the future, we are hoping that we will be putting on more events that you can be involved with, and focusing our attention on a range of activities. And apart from the roadmap, I'm now going to hand over to Nicole to give us an update on some of the other activities that we focused on in 2020 and 2021. Before we give you a bit of an overview of what we're hoping to do in 2022. Nicole has worked with us since the very beginning of Robotics Australia Group. She runs her own communication business and has been an invaluable support in helping us navigate the minefield of dealing with political parties of every persuasion at both federal and state level, and is a strong supporter of robotics. And even makes her daughters well, actually, you don't make your daughters are very keen on doing robotics education courses as well, so has a very personal connection to the industry as well. So thanks very much, Nicole.
Thanks, Sue. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Look, it's really exciting to have so many people join us today. A little bit daunting, but that's okay. As Sue said, I've been working for a fair while now with the Robotics Australia Group, and it's a real privilege to be part of what's going to be one of the most important sectors in our economy going forward. I would like to shout out to some of our colleagues who were involved in putting together the Robotics Venture Factory grant application, and also those I can see people who are here from the Central Highlands who were very supportive of us and what we were trying to achieve. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the submission, the Commonwealth Government's MMI grants, collaboration grants were available to us to apply. We put forward our application in September with the support of a number of project partners, some of whom are also on the line. We've got an excellent, really strong application, which is going to be the Robotics Ventures Factory, which will create robotics ventures themselves, more businesses, more jobs, more opportunity. We're looking at establishing a tech park at the former site of the Emerald Agricultural College. And it's a great proposal, and we're really confident that we're going to do well when the government gets through the review process. So far we've had really strong anecdotal feedback, but I'm aware that they were particularly oversubscribed for this grant process. So we're hopeful that there'll be some feedback soon. I think that there's obviously the election timing will play a factor in that. I imagine also, though, that most people in Canberra are slightly distracted, like the rest of us, by the current COVID situation. So I'd like to really thank all those people who are reaching out to us and offering their continued support with this, and keen to hear how the project's going. I promise you, you will hear as soon as we know. We will be letting people know. So we are continuing to discuss the merits of the project and also the broader robotics sector with people with candidates and current government representatives in the lead up to the election. Here in Queensland, I'm based in Brisbane. Here in Queensland, we're also working with the Queensland Government through the Department of State Development, where we've submitted an application to their IPP process. Again, we've had really good feedback about that and really good support from other parts of the Queensland Government. So we are running both submissions in parallel and making sure that we can do whatever we can to get this project off the ground. Thanks, Sue. In addition to the work that we're doing around engaging with government and promotion, or general promotion and advocacy of the sector, we wanted to make sure that we try and bring you opportunities to know about the grants and things that are available. So as many of you would know, if you have time to follow these, there is a lot in the grant space at the moment, which is great. Can't complain about that. But I think it makes it challenging, I guess, for some of the smaller entities that we work so closely with to track what's available and when. So just wanted to flag one or two opportunities with you here today. And one of the things that we'll be starting to do for our members is to correspond with you regularly about grant applications that we get and that come across our desk from a range of different sources to make sure that you don't miss out on any opportunities. So this one is an example of one, as I said, coming out again of the federal government. Very strong regional focus, which I know will appeal to a lot of you. Companies need to have a regional partner if they're going to try and secure one of these grants, between $250,000 and $500,000. Applications close 21st of February. So we will be sending out some correspondence after this, which will include the links. So if anyone's concerned about missing any of the links, I will definitely get those out to you. But I think it's really rewarding to see that not only is the government willing to put some more money into supporting AI and robotics capabilities for businesses and communities, but they're also taking a further regional focus. So they're looking at ways to extend opportunities more broadly right across the country. Thank you, Sue. And another one that's been shared with us, I think is a really good opportunity, and we don't have a huge amount of time for this one. So the National Accelerator. So a number of people on the call today, on the webinar today, are involved in this one. I know that the Queensland Government's a supporter and MET's also, but this is a great opportunity for companies to participate in a program that runs for several months and gives you the opportunity to, I guess, pitch to large clients, build up your networking, profile raising, those sorts of things. So again, we'll include this information for you, but if you're interested in this one, you might need to reach out to us fairly quickly because the applications are due fairly soon. Something else that I'd like to do today, and I think my colleagues from Connected Farms might be on the line, is to welcome Connected Farms as a partner with Robotics Australia Group. So you have to watch this space to see what we're going to be doing together, but we're really excited about having the support of companies that are, you know, looking to the future and looking to support all of the, not only the growth of robotics companies, but the broader sector. So we, you know, one of my big jobs, and you'll be hearing from me about this a lot, so apologies in advance, is that I'm going to grow the membership of RAG and grow the sponsorship opportunities that are out there. So very excited to have Connected Farms already working with us. They know a lot of the people that we've been working with, especially in the Emerald region, and we really look forward to sharing with you over the coming weeks and months what that will look like. So there's some exciting opportunities coming. So thank you, Connected Farms, for joining up with us. So I think you'll talk about a few of these things and then I'll come back to do more pitching about sponsorship and membership.
Yes, thanks, Nicole. So I guess the other thing that we have been busily doing in the background is building up some of our international partnerships. So the Robotics Australia Group is a founding member of the International Alliance of Robotics Associations. What we hope this will do is give us a platform to be able to connect a lot of our robotics companies with companies in other countries who have similar interests and perhaps see some joint ventures in the future, or at least promote some learning opportunities between robotics companies that are based here and those that are based in other countries. We have also formed a partnership with the United Nations. The United Nations has a program called AI for Good, and they have recently focused on looking at having more talks that are around robotics and how robotics can be used to help the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Again, the UN actually approached us about forming a partnership in this space, and it will give us the opportunity to put forward some of our local robotics companies who may have solutions to some of these sustainable development goals to really have a platform on the world stage. And we also are trying to help promote diversity within the robotics community, and we do that through being part of Women in Robotics, which is an international organisation. I'm the secretary of that organisation, which is about linking up all of the different women who are involved in robotics and giving them the opportunity for mentorship and just generally to share ideas and get support. And we are also proud partners in the Women in AI Awards for Australia and New Zealand, which will be held at the end of March in Melbourne this year. And we would love to see some women involved in robotics actually getting some of the awards in this relatively new awards program, which is associated with a global movement called Women in AI. So those are some of the international partnerships that we have. We've really only scratched the surface on what we can do in this space, and very keen to hear any feedback on things that people would like to see us get out of some of these international partnerships. So in terms of our plans for 2022, you've heard from Nicole and I that, although we may not have been very visible, we were actually doing quite a lot last year. So putting the roadmap together was quite a mammoth task, and also putting in the $70 million manufacturing modernisation initiative fund to create a robotics venture factory was quite an undertaking. And as Nicole has previewed, we're hoping that, whether that is successful or not, we will also have opportunities for potential funding from other sources using that model. And even if that fails, we will look at how we can proceed with developing something in the form of that robotics venture factory. So we're hoping that a lot of that work can be put to good use in the future. But those were two major initiatives which took up a lot of our time and energy. And what we were not able to do last year, which we really want to focus on this year, is actually about building up our membership and having a lot more of these sort of events, which I'd like to call community building events, where we can start to get the community to interact with one another and really to find out what's going on, who's who in the robotics community, and who you might benefit from actually networking and being associated with. As I mentioned, depending on the political circumstances, this year we might look at having an official launch of the Robotics Roadmap. In 2018, we got quite a lot of traction by launching the 2018 Roadmap at Parliament House, and it had quite a lot of good representation from senior political figures. We're not sure if we can replicate that, but we're keeping that option on the table potentially for March this year. As Nicole has previewed, we're looking at hopefully finding out the results of the funding applications that we have put in around the Robotics Venture Factory. And as I mentioned, we're hoping that we can follow through on that idea regardless of where the potential funding source lies. One of the things that we're very keen to do now that we've actually established quite the bones of a good network is to start going out to a lot of you to ask questions to help us to get benchmark data on the state of the robotics industry here in Australia, so that we can put out some white papers and so we can just generally communicate a bit better with everyone about what the robotics industry here in Australia looks like, how much we're exporting, how many jobs are we actually creating here in Australia, what are the growth opportunities, because I think what perhaps doesn't get highlighted is this really is a new industry opportunity for Australia, where there are a lot of growth opportunities, and we probably just need to see some support in some key areas. And again, by putting out surveys to all of you, identifying what those key areas are and how we can have do the advocacy necessary to see some support in those areas come through is going to be very important to us as we progress in 2022. And, I've mentioned that we have already established some international partnerships. So working with you all on how we can best leverage those international partnerships this year, again, is going to be something that's very important. And so, yes, we encourage you to stay in touch, and I might hand back to Nicole now to talk a bit more about what some of the future opportunities might be.
Thanks, Sue. I think one of the most important things is I encourage everyone to follow us on LinkedIn, and that's where we'll be trying to get information out to the group in the short term as quickly as we can. As I said, following this discussion today, we'll send you some information on the things that we've covered, and possibly looking at the number of Q&A, some of the questions we've not had the opportunity to answer. We're in the process of setting up a newsletter that will get information out to everyone. So I've noticed there's a few questions in the chat around education and career pathways. So I think that's becoming increasingly apparent to us that that's something that we need to have a look at. I'm not sure how it'll sit on our priorities for this year, but we are well aware of the need to look at all of the different and better understand all of the different education opportunities and make sure that those are actually connecting back to the robotics industry. I think that's the most important thing. There's a lot of people studying robotics or practicing robotics and then perhaps not taking it forward as a career opportunity. It's something that we're very keen to look at. So we have, as I mentioned, we have membership opportunities. In the next week, in fact, we have an opportunity for a number of our members to participate with one of our corporate partners in an invite-only event where they slightly similar to the accelerator program, they get to hear about some of the industry challenges that partners facing and present potential solutions. So that's an offering that we've got for members at the moment. So we'll be putting some more of those together, hopefully during the year, and inviting our members to participate. And again, always keen to have lots of sponsors on board. And I think one of the things that we'll see more of this year is looking at a broad range of sponsors in range of different sectors who want to work with us. And I think it's around the opportunity to support the industry and support us to advocate on your behalf. So we'll have, as Sue flagged already, a range of webinars as well. I'm hoping that this format's going to work quite well, and so that we'll be able to get easily in touch with everyone more consistently. Because as Sue said, we were very, very busy last year behind the scenes putting together the grant application and the roadmap. So I look forward to engaging with lots of you going forward, and I hope that we'll have the opportunity to do this again really soon.
Well, do you think we should have a look at these Q&As, Nicole?
I do.
Okay, so there is a question here from Adam from Chironics in Perth, Western Australia. They are always looking for robotics engineers, currently need at least 4 more. Is there someone we can post job ads with Robotics Australia Group to find national talent? I think that's certainly something that we can look into. My experience from speaking to, I should disclose, my sister's the managing director of Silicon Valley Robotics in the US, and she has experimented with job boards over there with varying success. So let us have a bit of a look into that. I think there are some, there are some good points, but there's also some pitfalls with running job boards. And, if we can add value, then that's certainly something I think that we should consider doing. But I'd like to probably do a bit more research on that. Thanks, Adam. I know that's a challenge for everybody in the robotics industry. Of the $18 billion revenue for the robotics industry, what proportion is for exports? Well, thanks very much for your question, Chris, and I do not know the answer. I think that is something that we will hope to unpick by starting to go out and do surveys of the network, but I think that that's not something that is very well known. One of the things that we would like to be able to do into the future is actually to encourage the Australian Bureau of Statistics to be collecting sufficient data to allow us to gain access to that information without having to rely on sort of more qualitative measures of just surveying the people that we know in the business. But unfortunately, that's not easy information to find. So we really just had to go off the main revenue of each of the companies and weren't able to really drill down deeper into what proportion of that was from exports. Another question here. Have we connected with Rodney Brooks? As a successful Australian roboticist, mainly operating abroad, he might have some useful input on what might be built as Australian robotics startups and industries. The answer is no, we have not. And yes, that is a very good idea. I think that he would, if he's available, would potentially be a great supporter of activities here to increase the sustainability of the industry. So we will definitely take that one on board. Thank you, Michael. Could consideration be given? Oh, there's some questions about the different types of membership, whether we can have student membership or different types of membership. That's definitely something that we will be talking about at our next board meeting. We just tried to keep it simple to start with and not have a whole stack of different categories. but I think, you know, the level of interest would suggest that there is demand for us to look at different options. And so that's definitely something that we'll put on the agenda. Thank you very much, Julian. Are we participating in the Defence Innovation Hub program, which is called for Applications for Innovative Technological Development Grants? Robotics Australia Group as a company is not participating, but that is something that we want to keep a close eye on. And thanks very much for the suggestion, Chris. I think that it is clear that a lot of our local robotics companies are benefiting from the amount of funding that is going into the defence sector at the moment. For those of you who are not familiar with this, and I mean, I think this was an initiative started under Malcolm Turnbull back in 2018. Australia is committed to defending something like 2% of our GDP on defence spending, and that is obviously potentially a good place if they're looking for technology for Australian robotics suppliers to be developing relationships. There are some challenges with that in that sometimes it can be challenging to navigate the defence procurement process. But yes, Chris, I think it's a fantastic opportunity and we definitely need to be keeping more on top of that. And, you know, as Nicole has previewed, that is one of the things that we want to focus on in 2022, and that is raising people's awareness of what some of the different grant and funding opportunities are in this space. Now, I'm hogging all the answers here. Nicole, you can just jump in if you would like.
I know that a number of our members are working with closely with Defence Department, so I think your answer is exactly right. And as we said, as Sue said, it's a matter of keeping track. I know there's another question about, do we have a list of grants? And that's one of our membership offerings will be to try and make sure that we get the information out to you as soon as it's released, so you've got plenty of time to respond to that. So,
yeah. Okay, how can robotics be able to contribute to the reduction in carbon emissions by 2030 by delivering new revolutionary energy infrastructure? I'm sure that that is possibly already happening. We probably aren't on top of all of the different developments that are happening in that space. But I'd like to think that there probably are some young companies who are starting to tackle work in that area. So that's a very good point. As I mentioned, you know, we've partnered with the UN AI for Good program now, and we'd be very keen if anyone wants to bring to our attention companies that are operating in that space, then they'd be really good candidates to be given an international platform to talk about the type of work that they're doing. So thank you very much for that suggestion. Are we able to expand on the robotics venture factory, the scope of use, proposed location, available for industry versus research? This is from Johanna Austin. Would you mind answering that one, Nicole?
No problem. Hi, Joe. We've got some materials that we'll make sure are up on the website and include a link in there so you can have a look at it. Very strong focus on the, I guess, industry development more than perhaps the research side at the moment. So looking at how we can support robotics companies to grow and to be established. So able to give you a whole lot of information about that. We've got a couple of flyers that are available that'll give you some general information. So please reach out to me if you would like to get them sooner than we get them out to you. So
thanks, Nicole. And there's a question here around how students can connect with industry, and is there a mentorship pathway you can suggest? Yeah, I think this tends to be quite a manual process, unfortunately, in terms of, you know, really it's just a matter of we're limited by the number of robotics companies and the bandwidth that they have to be able to do mentoring. That doesn't mean that they're not interested in doing mentoring, just that, you know, we don't have particularly large companies who are offering those opportunities, and it is a bit of a, you know, it can be quite time consuming for them. But, you know, when we have put out to our network opportunities for people, then we often do get a response. So I would just suggest that maybe that's something that you could drop us a line about and we could put out to our network, but unfortunately we can't guarantee a response, and that's just simply because of the current, you know, size of the industry. I think as we get more mature and grow, then there'll be opportunities for more of that. But I think what is true is that there are definitely pathways for people once they are qualified to get into robotics companies at the moment. As you probably heard, there is a shortage of robotics engineers, certainly experienced robotics engineers, being felt by just about everybody in the local robotics industry. And I think, while that's difficult for the companies, I think in terms of the future students who are studying robotics, it is good news, because it means that they're not necessarily going to have to travel overseas if they love robotics and they're really keen to work in the industry. There will be plenty of opportunities here.
Sue, I'm just watching the chat, and obviously these questions around education. So I think we might look at how we could actually facilitate a webinar that would connect. I can see people connecting on the chat, which is amazing. Great.
That's great.
Talking about mentoring they've got available. And I'm even within this group, there's organisations who can help each other with programs that lead to mentoring, that lead to job opportunities. So I think one of the things we might try and do is design a slightly smaller webinar that we can present some of the information and people can share and collaborate, because that's one of the main goals of Robotics Australia Group, is to get people together and to collaborate so that we're not all trying to do the same thing on our own. So I think if we can look at how we can pull everyone together, I think we'll be able to come up with some really good opportunities. So I'm really loving the chat here, because I'm seeing people offering all sorts of things. So that's great.
Thank you, Nexus, the Australian Association for Uncrewed Systems, Bosch, Omron, lots of people putting out there. So fantastic. Simon, I hope you're still online, jotting some of these down. But as Nicole suggests, we'll definitely follow up with that, because it's great to see, how many people are offering those opportunities. It's great.
And we've already been speaking as part of the Robotics Tech Park, which is a component of the Ventures Factory. In Emerald, we've been speaking to local organisations there, and to CQU and to TAFE. So a lot of organisations already, that we want to work within the space. So when companies get going, there's plenty of opportunities for pathways and for training and for education. So I think that we've got the bones of something really interesting there.
Great. Okay, so here's quite a long question. Any thoughts on how Australia better engages internationally, particularly on ISO standards and safety systems development? So
that might be one we need to take offline and answer in a bit more detail, Sue.
Yeah. However, thanks very much for the question, Rowan. We will take that one offline to look to answer it. But it's interesting in that one of the next webinars that we're quite keen to do is around standards and safety and design. So in particular, some work that a local Brisbane company is doing to help companies to be able to assess whether their technology will actually meet a lot of the necessary standards to be able to be put out into operation. So that's definitely something of interest. And we'll have a look at, what it is that we can do to help ease that transition and to have some input. Yes, there's a question here around the dearth of funding for hardware and how can we navigate the extra energy required to do hardware versus software, especially for startups. So hardware is hard, is what everyone says. But I think that, for the people who have been successful in this space, it really is just a matter of being able to develop the customers reasonably quickly to be able to scale the business. Everyone is finding challenges in terms of getting capital. Nathan Kirchner, one of our board members, has gone out and spoken to quite a few venture capital companies about this particular problem, some of whom actually state that they don't fund hardware startups because of the extra capital required and perceived additional risk. However, that doesn't mean that there are not opportunities. And so if you do get the opportunity to have a look at YouTube, you can have a look at some of the conversations that Nathan has had with a range of different investors on what those opportunities are. So there's a question here from Ian Dover about the brand issue associated with robotics and job loss. Will it be necessary to address this in Australia? Is the number of people who think there's too few to really worry ourselves about? It's a bit hard to know how many people this is a problem for, but we do know from feedback from some of the politicians that we deal with that it's a real issue. And if it is an issue for people in positions of influence, it doesn't matter how few they might be, then it is an issue. And I think the only way that we can answer that is, in my view, by actually starting to get more information from the industry that demonstrates that there are employment opportunities that are coming from developing a robotics industry here. And until we have some of those numbers, then it really is a difficult, it's a difficult argument to have to make, because people are wary of economic modelling and projections, or people are also wary of the experience of people overseas. They really would like to see data from here in Australia that demonstrates that rather than losing jobs, we're actually creating jobs in the sector. So that is a work in progress, Ian, and thank you very much for your question. Are there any plans for supporting university students interested in robotics? Yes, thanks, Elke, for that question. I think that's something that we will take on board. As I mentioned, because we were trying to keep things simple at the beginning, we had sort of moved away from the idea of having individual memberships. But, you know, given the interest in job boards and internships and those sort of opportunities, we might need to revisit what exactly that looks like. So thank you for your question. University of Canberra is about to have their first set of graduates in robotics and AI at the end of this year. Congratulations, University of Canberra. A push in student membership opportunities could help them feel more confident about their future opportunities. Yeah, that's a very good point. And we often do get that feedback. There seems to be a disconnect between you know, the demand for robotics engineers on the one side versus the supply of robotics engineers coming out from university. And we'd like to make sure that we can help to correct that disconnect. So yes, thanks, Dylan. We will have a look at what we can do in that space. What role will Robotics Australia Group take with regards to legal frameworks for service robots, more specifically in agriculture, for safe autonomous usage of the robot? Well, that is quite the question. I think that there's certainly a role that we can play, and I think as we're able to resource activities better, then that could be something that we could look at. But at the moment, I think what we would do is actually put our brains trust into opportunities. There are a couple of people here in Australia that have experience in that area. And if we do have the opportunity to have some input into that, then it's definitely something we should pursue. But thanks, Michael. That's an interesting question, and one that we should definitely be paying attention to. Someone suggested we encourage job sites like Seek to have a robotics session. That would be cool. Yeah, that's something we can have a think about. I think that that's something that we should definitely look at when we consider how we might be able to work on some sort of job board, or how we can support people who are looking for robotics engineers. Is there an index of grants somewhere? These ones looked really interesting. Nicole?
I think not at the moment, but I think that's something we'll be providing to members. So that's one of in our prospectus, that's one of our membership offerings. So we just wanted to make sure that we shared a couple today to give you a sense of the things that are out there and the opportunities. So we will have that available to our members. So thank you for that.
Thanks. Mikhail has asked about co-organising robotics hackathons among students, or maybe local chapters. We would love to have a local chapter in Sydney, Mikhail. So why don't you drop us a line and we can see what we might be able to do. I mean, we're really only limited by, you know, the people who are volunteering their time at the moment to make Robotics Australia into a thing. Yeah, we would love to be able to find ways that we can make people feel included and to really, increase the level of awareness that, there is a robotics industry here in Australia and people are developing some really interesting technologies. Are there online state or national meetups for us to connect to? Well, that's exactly what we're hoping to do this year. So we're looking to run a series of webinars. They might be based on the different chapters of the roadmap to go into explore some of those areas in further detail. As I said, the first ones like to be around safety and design. And then we might actually delve deeper into some of the other areas of the roadmap, maybe have something looking specifically at agriculture robots, and then, another one that's looking at defence. So that's certainly our intention. And obviously we want to support initiatives at the state level too, particularly when it gets to the point where we can start to have more in-person meetings. And I was very involved with Nikki Russo set up a robotics meetup group in Melbourne. And that was something we were very keen to see happen down in that area. And we have an inactive robotics and AI meetup group in Perth that's really just waiting for a bit of love and attention. So I think that that's definitely something we would be keen to pursue and to support.
So I'm happy for Christy to reach out to me on this one. So we'll see what we can do going forward on the
Great.
I'm just conscious of time. We've got a few questions left and not a lot of time.
6 minutes. So yes, so thanks. I'll just put up our contact details on the screen there, Christy, so that you can feel free to contact. I think there are a few other people asking for contact details, so please just jot those down now. Any exhibitions or events taking place in the manufacturing space during 2022, which you are going to be participate in?
Hopefully there's some activities that we can participate in. I think everyone's just waiting to see where those things end up, and I guess our focus for the beginning of the year is going to be, trying to progress the robotics venture factory, and as Sue said, getting that roadmap launched, and obviously now starting to engage with this great group of people who are obviously, I can just feel how enthusiastic everyone is. So it's I think let's see how we go for that one.
Yeah. Well, and also we're very strong supporters of Generate 22, which is being held in Melbourne at the end of March, being led by Nikki Russo from Exaptech. I'm going to be the MC for that 2-day conference. It is not specifically around manufacturing, though. It's more broadly around robotics and AI, but may have some interesting presentations from companies that are supplying into the space.
And that detail was in the chat just a moment ago. So
perfect.
Great to see.
So there's a comment here about how Australia is probably a lot higher up the list on field and agricultural robotics. And I'm sure that is true. Unfortunately, there is no global list that gives that rankings. But being Australian, I think that is definitely something that we should look at doing. So, just as we do really well in the Olympics with our gold medal tallies, particularly when you do it per population, I reckon we could come up with our own ranking system, which means that we're right up the top. That's an interesting question, though. Be interesting to know. I'm not sure that in terms of sales of our field and agricultural robots, we are ranking up near the top, though. But certainly it is true that Australia is much stronger in the development of service robots and industrial robots, and that's just the way it is. And so our focus at Robotics Australia Group is supporting the industry as it currently is. And, my dream in the future, not sure about the rest of everyone in Robotics Australia, but certainly my personal ambition would be to see that as we get success in the service robots sector, that then we start to really take on what we can in the industrial robot space as well, so that we can have sovereign capability in that area as well. Are there better or any mechanisms for SMEs to collaborate on syndicated tenders? Yes, there are. So certainly with the Robotics Venture Factory, that was an important element. All of the companies, I think, involved, Nicole, were SMEs.
Yes, growing. Some large,
so yeah,
but yes.
Just watch this space. And I'm just sensitive to time. We've got 3 more minutes. How many more questions we got to go?
Quite a few, but
I'm not sure
we've also captured those, so some of them will be able to, to take offline.
Yes. And thank you, Nathan, for putting in the catch comment email address. Okay, so sorry, now I've lost my place. Would it be worth connecting with the Army's Robotic and Autonomous Implementation and Coordination Office? Yes, it would be. I mean, we have personal contacts there, but we haven't really, entered into any sort of formal arrangement with them, but yeah, would love to have more to do with them. There is a focus on robotics, autonomous systems and AI at the Indo-Pacific 22 exhibition and conference. Will RAG be involved? We would love to be involved. We are just a kind of a startup in our own right though, so I guess it would depend on what basis we would be able to participate, but certainly we would be encouraging our members to be involved if that is an area, if they're supplying into the defence area. Thanks very much, Paul, for that question. Any consideration being given for bringing the AERA into the fold? They have quite a list of Australian R&A companies. Yes, I mean, I think we're all reasonably well connected with the Australian Robotics and Automation Association, and would love to be able to support their yearly conference. It's a great way for companies to get a look at some of the robotics talent that is coming through the university system at the moment. And yeah, very keen to see how we can work in with them. And we certainly had some early discussions with them when we were looking at forming Robotics Australia Group.
So I think we might have to.
I think that's going to be it.
There. Yeah, there's a couple of questions there from overseas companies. So we've captured those, and we'll try and get back to as many of you as possible. But as we said, there's quite a few still to answer, but please reach out to either Sue or myself, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can.
Thanks everyone for keeping us on our toes.
Great range of really questions. Good.
Yeah, it's great to see everyone online today, and yes, please keep an eye out. We will look to do more webinars in the future, and it won't just be Nicole and I speaking at the next ones. We'll be bringing in a range of people so you can get a bit more of an idea of what's happening in robotics in Australia. Thank you very much for everyone's time, and we will try and catch up with a lot of these questions after the webinar. And if you do need to go and have a look, we will post a recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel, and hopefully you've been able to capture some of the links as they've gone past. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for members of the Robotics Australia Group board who have joined us today. Thank you very much, Nicole. Everyone have a great day, and look forward to catching up with you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Bye.